Dear learners, welcome to the session on public relation and its allied functions. I am Dr. Pitabas Pradhan, Professor, Department of Mass Communication, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. In this session, we will discuss some functions which are very similar to public relation, which are confused with the concept of public relation. We will try to differentiate these functions from public relation. What are the differences and the similarities among these functions? And we will also discuss some of the fallacies, misconceptions, general misconceptions, also known as deep-rooted fallacies about the practice of public relations. So let us start. Public relation and its allied functions. We have discussed that a public relation is the deliberate, planned, sustained efforts by an organization to establish and maintain mutual understanding between an organization and its various publics. Another definition says that public relation is the management function which evaluates public attitude, identifies the policies and programs of an organization in public interest, and executes new programs of action to earn public understanding. Functions are responsibility of public relation. But there are some related functions and tools which are often misunderstood for public relation, for they serve purposes similar to that of a public relation, because the activities they perform, the functions for which they are used are very similar to the tools and functions of public relation. This is why there are sometimes the functions are confused. Okay. So we will discuss the difference between advertising, publicity, propaganda, lobbying, issue management, public affairs, etc. We will discuss both their differences and the similarities. And the first we will start with advertising. Advertising is a paid communication by an identified sponsor to influence the public. Publicity is information about an organization used by the news media based on its news value. Propaganda is deliberate and systematic use of information, often distorted, to influence or manipulate public opinion. Lobbying is attempts by individuals or private interest groups to influence the decisions at the level of the government in the best interest of the lobbyist or an industry they represent. So let us discuss issue management. The process of identifying issues, analyzing their impacts, and developing strategies to address those issues to prevent a major crisis. This is issue management. Public affairs. It is intended to influence public policy as a part of its efforts to manage a relationship with the stakeholders. So it is public affairs is related to promoting public agenda. You are promoting issues which are in public interest. Communication audit. It is a comprehensive evaluation of an organization's internal and external communications to find out the roadblocks, if any, the obstacles to the communication, if any, and continuous improvement of the communication system of an organization, okay, to improve the communication system's performance. Social audit. It is a formal review of an organization's endeavors, procedures, and code of conduct about its social responsibility and social impact. That is the way a company discharges its duties to its stakeholders and to the broader community where it operates. So social audit is all about making an audit of the society around the plant to understand how the organization's actions contributes to the improve the quality of life of the people in the community. Okay, so let us discuss one by one. Advertising versus public relation. What are the differences? Advertising is a mass communication of meaning intended to persuade. That is the definition proposed by Littlefield and Kirkpatrick. Another definition is that advertising is a mass paid communication that is intended to create awareness, impart information, develop attitudes, or influence action. A widely accepted definition of public advertising was presented by the American Marketing Association, which describes advertising as a paid form of a non-personal presentation or promotion of ideas, goods, and services by an identified sponsor. So you can see all these definitions of advertising emphasize on three core, phrases. One is it is a paid form of communication, a paid form of presentation of ideas, goods, and services. Number two, it is a non-personal presentation because advertising is never a personal form of communication, rather it is a mass, a marketing communication. Third is identified sponsor. The sponsor of advertisement is always identified because that owns benefit for the sponsor, yeah, advertiser. So the three phrases suggest that in advertising, the advertiser or space and time used for the communication. In case of print media, it is the space that is to be paid for by the advertiser. It is not free of cost communication because a newspaper charges for the newspaper space used for the advertisement and the advertiser has to pay for that. Similarly, in a television advertisement, the duration of the advertisement is to be paid for by the advertiser. The second important, part is the communication or messages are not necessarily tailored to individual self-interest of each recipient. Instead, they are directed at a vast audience intended to promote the selling of ideas, goods, and services. That is, advertising is a form of mass communication. It is never interpersonal communication because the messages are never directed to individuals, tailored to the interest of each individual. Third, in advertising, the source of the message is identified. That is, the sponsor is identified. The sponsor who pays for the advertisement is identified in the advertisement. So, advertising is a paid non-personal communication of message intended to sell or promote a product, service, or idea. In advertising, the main goal is to influence the public so that they accept the message or arguments of the advertiser. Organizations' communications and interaction with its clients, customers, public about the product, services, and ideas to promote their sales advertising. So unlike public relations, advertising attempts to present opinions and ideas to influence attitude and actions. As in the case of propaganda. In propaganda also, the intent is to influence the attitude and behavior. Unlike propaganda, the source is known in advertising. In propaganda, the source may be silent. But in advertising, the source has to be identified. However, the organization's communications about itself and its activities for the promotion of its image is a public relation because there the communications are intended to promote the image of the corporation as in the case of a corporate advertising. So corporate advertising is used to promote an organization's image rather than its products and services. So from this perspective, advertising is a tool of a public relation. So advertising can also be treated as a tool of public relation. Now come to publicity. That is publicity versus public relation. What are the similarities and what are the differences? So publicity is information from an outside source used by the news media based on its news value. Okay, that is, the news media takes note of an event organized by an organization and writes a story about that and prints that story. So this is how the organization gets publicity. So the information reported is pursued by the media decision makers to be of interest and importance to their audiences. Otherwise, they will not report it. An organization's event that is not likely to be interesting to the media audience is likely to be rejected by the media. They will never report it. So in publicity, the source of a media story or originator of the story may or may not be identified, number one. Number two, the source does not pay for the media audience time or space. It is not paid, unpaid form of communication. The final story reported in the media may or may not be the same as the one originally presented to the media, prepared by the reporter on the, in the site of the venue. As the media has the discretion to edit the story. Media gatekeepers have the discretion to edit the story or to reject it altogether. So the final story that appears in the media may not be what has been submitted to the media. Number four, each medium carrying the story becomes the source in the eyes of its readers. Because there is no source, it is presented in the form of news. So for the readers, the media itself is the originator of the story, the source of the information. Okay? Number fifth, the originator of the story has little control over how or when the story will be reported. An organization is free to write a press release and send to a media organization for its onward transmission or reporting. But the organization's management cannot decide how the press release is finally reported in the media. So publicity is an uncontrolled method of placing messages in the media, because the management of the organization cannot control what is to be reported finally in the media. The information about the organization may reach the media as either reports of the organization submitted to the media in the form of a press release, feature story, paper interview or film clip, because sometimes an event is organized by the organization and its a PRO writes a report and sends it to the media organization, maybe in the form of a press release, maybe in the form of a feature story, maybe in the form of a tape interview or in the form of a film clip. So this is one way of sending the organization story to the media. Okay. Another method of placing publicity is to stage a newsworthy event. Okay. Organize a newsworthy event that attracts the media coverage, that attracts the media attention. And the media persons, media representatives will definitely report such event themselves. So there is no need for the organization's PRO to write a story and send it to the media. So these are the two primary ways through which the organization's story reaches the media. Okay. Thus, anniversaries, open house, marathons, ceremonial appointments, and all sorts of special events are designed to be reported as news. So either the public relation officer sends the report to the media or the media reporter prepares the report based on the event. Some incidents also prompt the media to do critical stories about the organization. If anything wrong is done by the organization, then the media is likely to report the event criticizing the organization. That is, a negative report means earning negative publicity for the organization. Therefore, publicity can be positive as well as a negative. Therefore, publicity can be both a positive or negative depending on the kind of situation the media reports about an organization. Public relation involves a personal approach and contacts. Public relation mostly engages personal contact between the PRO and the stakeholders. In many cases, for example, organizing an open house. In an open house, the PRO and the community people personally interact. But in publicity, the event is organized and the media takes note of it. There is no personal interaction. So that can be a non-personal approach to communication. So publicity is non-personal, whereas public relation is a personal approach to communication. Okay? Now propaganda. Propaganda versus public relation. Propaganda as a promotional strategy is widely seen as a systematic effort to manipulate people's beliefs and actions. So propaganda involves manipulating people's beliefs and actions, especially to serve the interest of the organization. That is, to promote the interest of the organization, the people's beliefs and actions are manipulated through distorted communication, through self-serving communications. It is an organized effort to propagate a doctrine, an idea, or a cause. Propagating an idea, an ideology, for example, Nazi ideology, for example, an idea or cause. Okay, in elections, the candidates adopt propaganda strategies to influence the voters because their intent is to win the election. If they win, then the use of distorted meaning is also acceptable. Nazi leader Joseph Goebbels, who is also known as the propaganda manager of the Nazi movement, Hitler, argued that propaganda is an instrument of politics, the function of which is not necessarily to convert and change, rather to attract followers and to keep them in line. That is, attract followers and make them to fall in line. So Goebbels described propaganda as an instrument of politics. That is a tool of social control where the focus is on blanketing every endeavor of human action. Okay, and when you suggest a certain proposition, the people are most likely to accept your point of view. So this way they will fall in line. They will accept your point of argument and follow your ideology. So propaganda refers to attempts at persuasion driven by self-interest. Propaganda is a communication in self-interest to promote the self-interest of the propagandist. Yeah, the person who is engaging in propaganda, in which facts may be distorted to achieve the sponsor's purpose. In propaganda, distortion of the facts, manipulation of the facts is common if it serves the sponsor's purpose. So it is not necessarily ethical. Propaganda is not necessarily ethical. Okay, as it is open to use of false or distorted information, distorted messages to mislead the target audiences. So when a politician is trying to distort information, manipulate facts to influence the people, then it cannot be treated as ethical. So it is not necessarily ethical. So it is not necessarily ethical as it is open to the use of false or distorted messages to mislead the target audiences. Therefore, propaganda is mostly a short-term approach. It is mostly a short-term approach. Public relation, in contrast, seeks to persuade and foster mutual understanding. Public relation is based on sharing of factual information for promoting mutual understanding. Okay, so it is ethical practice. It is based on ethical practices. It is based on a willing acceptance of ideas to promote desirable attitudes towards the organization. Public relation relies on a long-term strategy grounded in ethical principles and truthful means. Propaganda is mostly one-sided communication, whereas public relation is founded on a two-way process of information sharing and persuasion. So propaganda may be one-sided because the receivers of information has no role to play in the exercise of propaganda, because one person or institution is trying to influence the other. But in public relation, it is a mutual influencing process. It is a mutual exchange of information to educate the parties to come to a consensus, yet to come to some kind of a negotiation or mutual understanding. It is based on a willing acceptance of ideas to promote desirable attitudes towards the organization. So public relation relies on a long-term strategy grounded in ethical principles and truthful means. In public relations, however, the end can never justify the use of false, harmful, or questionable means. It must be ethical and truthful. Propaganda is mostly one-sided communication, whereas public relation is founded on a two-way process of information sharing and persuasion, without which mutual adjustment is not possible. So the fundamental difference between public relations and propaganda is that while public relation is based on factual, accurate, and credible information, propaganda is liable to invite suspicion and disbelief because it is self-driven. It is generated in self-interest. Misconceptions about public relation. What are the misconceptions? Yeah, fallacies we call. Public relations are referred to as often, though public relation is an ethical practice of two-way communication to foster relationship, sometimes, of course, taking note of some of the exceptional practices, public relation people are referred to as image makers and spin doctors. Gary McCormick, CEO and chair of PRSA, Public Relations Society of America, claims that the profession of public relation is far more sophisticated and delivers considerably more value than it is given credit for. Often, public relations contribution to society, contribution to organizational development is ignored. To blame it for image management and spinning the messages of certain organizations. But in reality, public relation contributes to the organization much more than what is being realized. It is often claimed that successful public relation is all about a smart guy with a pretty face. A smart boy, a girl with a pretty face is often accepted as a good PRO. Sometimes people think that such people can be good PRO, but that is not true. In reality, Modern public relation is much more than that. It is much more than a smart guy with a pretty face. As a modern concept, public relation is a planned process that influences public opinion, that is used to induce media attention, okay, for generating publicity, to engage with stakeholders, that is an organization's attempts to engage with stakeholders, and to tell a brand story for creating impactful connect with the customers and other stakeholders. So public relations is much more than what is generally referred to as image makers and spin doctors, because they rely on strategic practices to design impactful campaigns for corporate bodies. Strategically designed campaigns help public bodies, help organization in strengthening relationship, in fostering relationship with stakeholders, in projecting a good corporate image, in promoting enhancing reputation, in managing any possible crisis issues, and they do a lot more when public relations is practiced as a strategic, profession, as a strategic exercise. So, I am reminded of a statement by our former Prime Minister, Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao, in his address to the PRSI National Conference in 1993. As part of his address, he said that you have the public, as public relation people, you have the magic wand, okay, that you can use to grow the human hair by 1 foot every day. This is the kind of, okay, so that means that he used this statement to explain that the public relation people can make positive images, okay, they can falsely create public images going beyond the reality, they can twist the message to create a false perception, a misplaced perception to benefit the organization. But in reality, that is not possible, because public relation must be based on responsible performance. Irresponsible performance can never be used to bolster image, to project image. So, for projecting positive image, for projecting an attractive image, or for enhancing reputation, what is important is responsible performance, because public relation is all about responsible performance followed by persuasive publicity. If an organization is not performing, an attractive image of that organization cannot be built, because public relation cannot bolster a bad cause. If the cause is not good, if the cause is not in public interest, public relation exercise cannot project an attractive image of the organization. So this is what is very important to understand the misplaced perception, misconception about public relation, and to avoid engaging in such practices to respect for the profession of public relation. I hope you understood. The various allied functions of public relation, that is advertising, publicity, propaganda, lobbying, issue management, public, all these are very important parts of, the public relation profession, but there exist differences. Some of these are tools of public relation and some of these concepts are practiced under different situations. So they should not be misunderstood. There is no reason to misunderstand between public relation and all these related and allied disciplines. That understanding of that will help PR practitioners to ethically engage in fruitful public relation exercises. So I hope you understood the points I tried to make, and thank you.